So I think I know the answer, but have you ever heard someone say they're playing favorites? Or, maybe you've heard someone say it depends on who's working, right? Those statements usually aren't about the standard, they're about consistency. One of the quickest ways uh, to lose credibility as a leader is to apply standards differently depending on the person. The high performer, typically gets another chance. The new employee gets corrected immediately. One team is held accountable while another team gets a pass. And before long, employees stop asking, "What's the standard?" They start asking, "Who's involved?" That's a dangerous place, really, for any team. But here's something that I believe: people can accept accountability. What they struggle to accept is inconsistency. Most people don't expect perfection from their leaders, but they do expect fairness. They expect the same standard to apply to everyone, including the leader. But let me be very clear. Consistency doesn't mean treating everyone identically. Different people require different coaching. Different personalities require different communication. Different experience levels require different levels of guidance, right? And that's leadership. But the standard itself should never change. Respect shouldn't be optional because someone is your best performer. Professionalism shouldn't depend on someone's years of service. Ownership shouldn't be expected from one employee but ignored in another. The behavior you're willing to overlook today becomes the culture you'll inherit tomorrow. I've seen leaders spend months trying to rebuild trust after just a few inconsistent decisions because people truly notice. They notice what gets corrected. They notice who doesn't. They notice which standards matter and which ones just kind of quietly disappear, when it's convenient. That's why consistency is so important. Consistency creates predictability. Predictability builds trust, and trust gives leaders the credibility to hold people accountable. Without consistency, accountability starts to feel personal instead of professional, right? So here's a question that I challenge, every leader to ask: is if another employee did the exact same thing tomorrow, would I respond the same way? If the answer is no, obviously stop and ask yourself why. Because consistency isn't just about protecting the standard, it's about protecting your credibility. So my challenge for you with this is: think about one standard you've established for your team. And now ask yourself honestly, have I enforced this consistently for everyone? Or have I allowed exceptions based on performance, personality, convenience, friendship? Accountability doesn't begin with correcting others. It begins with leading consistently yourself. And when your team knows the standard is fair, predictable, and applies to everyone, accountability becomes, something they understand, not something they fear. Thanks for watching. This is another leadership minute from Hydelogix. Better thinking, better leaders, better futures.